Queens who broke all rules. The female rulers who shocked Europe. She declared herself a man to rule an empire. She wore armor into battle and commanded armies that conquered half of Europe. When the Pope tried to stop her, she kidnapped him. Another queen abolished marriage entirely in her kingdom and created the world's first feminist state. And one scandalized the world by ruling while dressed as a king, complete with a fake beard. These are the stories of the queens who didn't just break the rules, they completely rewrote them. And their shocking decisions changed the course of world history. Queens who broke all rules. Queen 1, Christina of Sweden. The queen who became a king. Our first rule breaker was Queen Christina of Sweden, the woman who scandalized 17th century Europe by refusing to be feminine. When Christina became queen at age 6 in 1632, her regents made a shocking decision: they would raise her as a prince. She learned sword fighting, military strategy, and philosophy, subjects forbidden to women. By the time she reached adulthood, Christina had become something Europe had never seen: a female ruler who acted exactly like a male king. She refused to wear dresses, instead dressing in men's clothing and boots. She hunted, dueled, and rode horses like a man. Foreign ambassadors were shocked when they met her. Many couldn't tell if she was male or female. But Christina's most shocking rule-breaking came when Parliament demanded she marry and produce an heir. Her response? She declared that she would never marry any man. In 1650, she scandalized Europe further by bringing her favorite, Countess Eberspar, to live with her in the palace. The two women were inseparable, sharing rooms and appearing together at all state functions. Rumors spread across Europe: was the Queen of Sweden in a romantic relationship with another woman? The scandal reached such heights that the Pope himself condemned her unnatural behaviors. Christina's response was the most shocking decision in royal history. In 1654, at age 27, she abdicated the throne, declared herself a man, and left Sweden forever. She spent the rest of her life in Rome, wearing men's clothing, using male pronouns, and demanding to be addressed as His Majesty. Christina had literally chosen to give up one of Europe's most powerful thrones rather than conform to female expectations. Queen 2, Wu Zetian, the empress who terrorized China. But Christina's rule-breaking pales compared to Wu Zetian, the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor, and the most ruthless ruler China had ever seen. Wu started as a low-ranking concubine in the imperial harem. But by 690 AD, she had murdered her way to the top of the Chinese empire. Her first victims were her own children. When her newborn daughter died mysteriously, Wu accused the current empress of murder. Historians now believe Wu killed her own baby to eliminate her rival. But that was just the beginning. When Wu became empress, she established the most brutal secret police force in Chinese history. Anyone who opposed her, including her own sons, faced torture, exile, or death. During her 15-year reign, Wu Zetian executed or exiled thousands of nobles, generals, and court officials. She killed so many people that historians call her rule the Reign of Terror. Pause for impact. But here's the shocking part: Wu's brutal rule-breaking actually improved China. She promoted officials based on merit rather than birth, expanded the empire to its largest size, and created the most efficient government in Chinese history. Chinese imperial palace and artwork. Wu broke the ultimate rule by declaring herself emperor, not empress, but emperor. She wore the dragon robes, sat on the dragon throne, and demanded all the honors given to male rulers. When Confucian scholars protested that women couldn't rule, Wu had them executed and replaced them with Buddhist monks who supported female leadership. She even broke the rule about dynasty names, changing the Tang dynasty to the Wu dynasty, making herself the founder of her own imperial line. Queen 3, Nzinga of Nongo, the warrior queen who defied Portugal. But the most badass rule-breaker was Queen Nzinga of Nongo and Matamber in West Africa, the woman who spent 40 years fighting the Portuguese Empire and never lost. When Nzinga became queen in 1624, the Portuguese had been enslaving her people for decades. Instead of accepting defeat, she broke every rule about how African rulers were supposed to interact with European colonizers. First, she declared that any slave who reached her kingdom would be immediately freed. This wasn't just charity, it was warfare. She turned escaped slaves into soldiers, building an army that knew how to fight Europeans. Second, she broke the rule about gender in warfare. Nzinga personally led her armies into battle, wearing armor and carrying weapons. At age 60, she was still fighting on the front lines. Third, she broke the rule about African disunity. Nzinga forged alliances with rival kingdoms, Dutch traders, and even Portuguese rebels, creating a coalition that held off European colonization for decades. But Nzinga's most shocking rule-breaking was personal. She declared herself a king, not a queen. She dressed as a man, took multiple wives, and demanded to be addressed with male titles. When Portuguese diplomats protested that women couldn't be kings, Nzinga's response was legendary. She challenged the Portuguese governor to single combat. When he refused, she declared him a coward and resumed her war against his forces. Nzinga ruled for 37 years, never once submitting to Portuguese authority. When she died at age 82, she was still an independent ruler of a free African kingdom. Queen 4, Hatshepsut, the pharaoh who wore a fake beard, but the original rule-breaker was Hatshepsut, the Egyptian queen who declared herself pharaoh 3,500 years ago and ruled for 22 years with a fake beard. When Hatshepsut's husband died, she was supposed to be a regent for his young son from another wife. Instead, she broke the ultimate rule. She declared herself pharaoh. But becoming pharaoh as a woman required extreme rule-breaking. Egyptian pharaohs were considered living gods, specifically, male gods. How could a woman claim divine kingship? Hatshepsut's solution was shocking. She literally transformed herself into a man. She wore the traditional false beard of the pharaohs. She dressed in men's clothing and bound her breasts. She even changed her name, adopting the masculine form, Hatshepsut. In her official portraits, she was depicted with a muscular male body, wearing the crown and regalia of a male pharaoh. Foreign diplomats who met her described her as the king. Many never knew she was biologically female. But Hatshepsut's rule-breaking went beyond gender. She broke the pharaonic tradition of constant warfare by focusing on trade and construction instead. While other pharaohs conquered territories, Hatshepsut built trading expeditions. Her famous expedition to the land of Punt brought back exotic animals, gold, and incense trees that still grow in Egypt today. She also broke architectural rules by building the most beautiful temple in Egyptian history, Deir el-Bahari, which still stands 3,500 years later. When Hatshepsut died, her stepson Thutmose III tried to erase her from history. He destroyed her statues, chiseled her name from monuments, and tried to pretend she had never existed. But he failed. Archaeologists have rediscovered her story, and today we know that Hatshepsut's 22-year reign was one of the most prosperous periods in Egyptian history. The pattern of rule-breaking. So what do all these queens have in common? They all broke the same fundamental rule. They refused to accept that being female limited their power. Christina, Wu Zetian, Nzinga, and Hatshepsut all faced the same problem. Their societies believed women couldn't rule effectively. Instead of accepting this limitation, they found ways to work around it. Some, like Christina and Nzinga, declared themselves male rulers. Others, like Wu Zetian, used ruthless tactics to prove they could be as strong as any king. Hatshepsut literally disguised herself as a man to claim divine kingship. But the most important rule they all broke was the expectation that female rulers should be gentle, passive, and maternal. Christina was a warrior scholar. Wu Zetian was a strategic genius who eliminated her enemies. Nzinga was a military commander who fought colonizers. Hatshepsut was an economic innovator who prioritized trade over warfare. None of them ruled like traditional women. They ruled like effective leaders, using whatever tactics were necessary to protect and expand their kingdoms. Modern lessons today, we still see echoes of the challenges these queens faced. Female political leaders are often criticized for being too aggressive or not feminine enough, the same criticisms faced by rulers thousands of years ago. The queens who broke all the rules teach us that effective leadership has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with intelligence, courage, and the willingness to make difficult decisions. Christina of Sweden showed that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from power on your own terms. Wu Zetian proved that ruthless tactics, while morally questionable, can create effective governance. Nzinga of Nongo demonstrated that resistance to oppression can succeed when you're willing to break all the rules your enemies expect you to follow. And Hatshepsut showed that sometimes you have to completely reinvent yourself to achieve your goals. These women didn't just break rules, they proved that the rules themselves were wrong. The queens who broke all the rules weren't perfect, some were brutal, others were controversial, and all of them scandalized their contemporaries. But they all shared one quality: they refused to let other people's expectations limit their potential. Which of these rule-breaking queens do you think was the most effective? Was Christina right to abdicate rather than conform? Was Wu Zetian's brutality justified by her results? Could Nzinga have defeated the Portuguese without breaking gender rules? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about historical figures who refuse to follow the rules, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Next week, we're covering the male rulers who were so outrageous that they make these queens look conservative. Trust me, when you hear about the Roman emperor who married his horse and the king who declared war on the ocean, you'll understand that breaking rules has always been a requirement for unforgettable leadership. End screen with related videos. Remember, the most powerful people in history weren't the ones who followed all the rules, they were the ones who had the courage to break goodbye.